Check, check. Okay. All right. Hi, everyone. Happy Monday. All right. Can everyone hear me okay? Looks like yes. Oh, perfect. Great. Well, good to see you all. Who's still adapting to the time change? I am. Yeah. Oh, no. That's my cat being sick. I'll be right back. I'm sorry. Oh. Okay. Excuse me. Sorry about that. Ah. Well, yeah, still adjusting to the chime change myself, but I always find the fall back is a little better than the spring forward. Oh, the cats are okay. Um, uh, Sometimes one of them either overeats or undereats. So uh, I expect he'll be just fine. Um, Today there's a couple housekeeping things just real quick that we'll do after I share my screen. And then we'll get on to our lesson on the chapter entitled Things, which is about particulars. So we covered universals last time. We're going to be covering particulars this time. Oh, no. So this is one of the more abstract chapters, kind of like last week. Even though we're talking about particular objects, we're talking about um, characteristics of objects, properties of objects, what makes a particular object that particular object and not some other particular object. So um, it's kind of a little bit more concrete than the material from last week, but it's also still fairly abstract. The good news is after this chapter, we're getting back to some more, I guess, a little more concrete stuff. I think after this, if I'm not mistaken, the nature of the mind is next. Um, so that's pretty cool. The housekeeping stuff. I'm sure most of you have probably seen my announcement, but just in case you haven't, there is now a list of essay topics available. So there are 10 topics. Um, they're they're specific enough to keep you, I think, focused on the topic without going too far astray, but open-ended enough that you can kind of do your own thing with it. There are multiple angles you can take towards the same topic. Um, there are some classic topics like rationalism versus empiricism. I've got one on, I think, knowledge and belief. I've got some that are pretty open-ended. Pretty open-ended, like um, there's one where you can reference philosophical themes in a TV show or a movie or a book or a video game and use our course material to explain those themes and to maybe make further claims about whatever media you choose and use what you've learned in this class to support those claims. I've tried to stay away from ethical issues because this isn't really an ethics class, right? Because I mean, so this is mind, world, and knowledge, right? And so really what this is a metaphysics, mind, and epistemology class. But that's not to say that you couldn't choose a topic like that and bring morality and ethics and that kind of thing into your discussion, as long as you also had some stuff about I don't know, a personhood. Do you see what I mean? So that might be an approach you could take towards that topic. What's another one? Well, I've got all kinds of other ones. I've got, do we have free will? Does God exist? Right. And I've got questions for you to consider under each topic, little points of advice, and the readings that you'll want to start with. So if you can't come up with a topic or you've been having difficulty, you should have everything there to get you thinking about a topic. Either one of the 10 suggested topics, or maybe something else. Maybe reading through it will inspire a different idea, and that's fine too. Well, you can use that topic. I'm just saying, don't like emphasize the metaphysical stuff or the epistemological stuff in addition to the ethical stuff. So, if you're talking about ethical issues related to abortion, you might be talking about you might also need to talk about personhood, right? When is something a person, right? An adult is a person. A baby is a person, arguably, but is a blastocyst or a fetus a person, right? That's where the metaphysics comes in. So you could still do that topic if you focused on the metaphysics and used that to inform your answer to whether, when abortion might be moral versus immoral, et cetera, right? So you could still do that. It's just, you know, um, don't forget about the metaphysics. Are we expected to use outside sources? Yeah, I'd say so. Like, in fact, one of the suggested topics is a fun one called "What is Enlightenment?" And it's completely out of the blue, really. It's not a question we consider in our textbook. It's just something that well, really, I wrote one of my first short undergraduate papers on all the way back in the day. You would want to read the essay that I've listed there by Immanuel Kant, What is Enlightenment? Where Kant argues that enlightenment is freedom from our self-imposed ignorance. And basically, you'd have to read that essay and state whether you agree or disagree with Kant and why. So that's an outside source. I always say start with the textbook, but don't feel limited to the textbook. And I would say for this paper, you want to aim for 3 to 5 sources, including the textbook. So one source could be a textbook chapter, another source could be a different textbook chapter. Maybe you find a scholarly paper for a third source, right? I don't expect you to have this big giant list of outside sources, but I do want you to think about including some stuff beyond the textbook. And that's because, this is something that you're going to have to do a lot of throughout your time at university, right? It might seem daunting now to go out and find a whole bunch of papers or books or book chapters on a particular topic. No, you shouldn't cite Wikipedia. You can find sources in the Wikipedia references section that might be good, but you shouldn't cite Wikipedia. Because Wikipedia is, technically an encyclopedia, and also Wikipedia articles can be wrong. If you're going to cite an encyclopedia, cite the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. That's a pretty safe one, but no other encyclopedias, including Wikipedia. Although you might be able to use Wikipedia to identify other sources that you could cite. Yes. Yeah. Sources have to be scholarly or academic, or like something from a newspaper if we're talking about historical or current events. Do cite different chapters separately if you're citing the textbook. And yeah, you can use Google Scholar. That's a good way to find scholarly material. Maybe we'll talk more about the essay as we wrap up, because I don't know how long we'll actually go today. Because I'm, in addition to being sleepy, I'm also feeling a little bit under the weather. Um, I've also, even though the tests are completed, I've changed the availability date so that even if you've completed the test, you should still be able to see it. And I'm wondering if you can see the which answers you got correct or incorrect when it comes to, say, the multiple choice questions. Because if you can, then that means all I have to do is put together a quick answer guide for the short answer questions, and then you'll be able to go through. You still can't, huh? That's really weird. I don't know. Okay, I don't know why that is. That may just be a feature of Brightspace that I can't do anything about. I'm wondering, yeah, maybe I can find some documentation here real quick before we get started with the materials. Yeah, I think it might just be a Brightspace thing, guys. And if it is, yeah, I'll try, after class, I'll see if I can hunt down some documentation. But I don't understand why it would be that way. Like, because we can put comments on your test. So yeah, and that's what I've set up for the multiple choice section of the quiz. So I'm not sure why this is happening. Here, I'm gonna search real quick. Keep sharing my screen so that everyone can see. Yeah, same here. It's like we each can't see the other side of Brightspace to know where the problem is. Brightspace, Carlton. How can I see my quiz feedback? Here we go, viewing quiz feedback. Well, that's what I'm working on, but if you can't see your own answers, then like, can you see the answers you gave? Because if you can't, then I can post a thing with the answers, but yeah, see, that's the problem. Before I do anything like that, I've got to sort this issue out. Otherwise, it's not really going to be very helpful, right? So let's see. This looks helpful. You log into Brightspace, you go to your courses, tools, quizzes, select submissions, where you can view your score and feedback. Under individual attempts, click on your attempt. If your instructor has provided written feedback for a question. Okay, so can someone try this? real quick. I'm going to put this in the chat. These are the instructions for viewing quiz feedback. Okay. Okay, so Poppy just tried it. Yeah, because I've published the results, so I don't know. I'm stuck. Let's see. View quiz feedback. I wonder if this will. Oh. Go to the evaluation and feedback section. It should be automatically configured to do that, though. But I'll try that now. So Jose, you can. Okay, it's okay. It doesn't show anything. Okay. Well. Well, I'll have to try what Poppy suggests. Let's do that now, just to get it done. Okay, so tools, quizzes. We'll try it for quiz 1. And then, well, evaluation and feedback. Maybe it's this auto-published. Oh. All questions with correct answers. Oh, I think maybe we've solved it. Okay, that's new to me. All right, now you should be able to see. And you know what? Let's do the same with the makeup quiz. So does someone want to check again? Okay, perfect. All right. Sorry about that, everyone. Well, the makeup quiz is actually for students who were sick or who had like some emergency arise. There we go. Okay, so now that that's done, all done, whoa, that was a long bit of housekeeping, but we figured it out together. So thanks everyone for your patience and for your assistance. I guess I'm getting old. I don't seem to be as tech savvy as I used to be. Okay, so now that you can see the feedback, that means I can make an answer guide. Now, you shouldn't need one for the multiple choice, but I'll put something together real quick for the short answer that will let you know what the question's called for, and what sort of stuff you would have to include in an answer in order to get full marks. That'll be forthcoming later today or tomorrow. I apologize that it's not done sooner, but it's just been that kind of month so far. Very, very busy indeed. Okay. So last time we talked about universals, which might be things like properties. Properties might be universals, and particulars instantiate those properties. So, for example, there's a particular shade of orange that my cat here instantiates. Now, this shade exists, if you're a realist, over and above this particular cat. In fact, his brother has a very similar shade. They both live here with me. And they're each particulars who instantiate this universal sort of orangey ginger cat fur color. Yeah, it's not even been a week yet. So, now you might be a realist about universals, maybe a strong realist like Plato. You might be a moderate realist like Aristotle. You might be a nominalist like William of Ockham. So universals don't really exist. We just have names for this particular thing and that particular thing and that particular thing. Quine, also kind of a nominalist, as we saw. Or you could be a conceptualist like Abelard, right? Lots of positions we can take with respect to universals. But the point is that universals are supposed to be this, this thing that's like over and above the particulars that particular objects instantiate. So blueness might be a universal, and various blue objects instantiate this blueness. They instantiate the universal. But this week we're going to talk about particulars. So particulars are individual entities, individual existing entities. And they could be very, very big, like stars and planets or galaxies, or they could be really, really small things. Compared to a planet, this cat here is quite small. Cells, bacteria, even smaller, and so on and so forth, all the way down. We can go as small or as large as we like. We will still find particular things. But keep in mind that what we're doing when we ask questions about particulars is we're not really asking scientific questions about particulars, although scientific questions and answers might be somewhat helpful for us. What we're actually doing is asking metaphysical questions. So let's move myself out of the way. So we're asking questions like, what is it for some object to be the kind of thing that it is? So what is it for a chair to be a chair and not something else? What is it for a dog to be a dog and not something else, right? And notice that, when we talk about particular objects, we focus a lot on the characteristics or the properties that those objects have. And these are important, right? These might arguably determine what a particular thing is. So we might want to know about the relationship between something, some object or entity, and its characteristics. We might ask whether there's something more to an object besides its characteristics, or whether the characteristics are all that there is. And we might wonder whether there are some characteristics that are more important when it comes to being a thing than other characteristics, and so on and so forth. You mean theology? Oh, does this fall under ontology? Yeah. Oh, does this fall under ontology? Yeah, it does, really. Ontology is an area of metaphysics. Ontology is the study of being. right? And as we'll see, we're not getting too deep into this time, but on Wednesday's class, when we look at the last half of the chapter, we're going to get pretty ontological, especially when we look at Whitehead, and especially when we look at Heidegger. That's where things are going to start getting pretty abstract and far out, right? So yeah, sometimes people just treat these as, strictly speaking, metaphysical questions, but technically, yeah, I suppose this would be ontology. Because we're talking about beings. Like when we talk about particular things, particular entities, we're talking about individual beings, whether it's a living being or something else, like a chair or a table or a cup. So what is the world made up of? It's made up of things. It's made up of particulars. And all these things in the world, each individual thing has its own unique identifying properties. So now things might be decomposable, right? Just because I've got an individual item, a particular being, it doesn't mean that it doesn't have parts or something. My computer is a thing. This computer that I'm using to lecture to you today is an individual entity, but it's made up of parts. It's got a hard drive, it's got some random access memory, it's got a power supply, etc., etc. But I take this particular computer, this thing, as a basic unit, right? If there are other universes, then yes, I want to say yes, that would make the universe a particular. Like this universe is supposed to the one before or after it, or as opposed to one of the other universes in the multiverse or something, right? This chapter is not quite about that. These would be universals. I'm not talking about cupness or redness, but this particular cup, right? Well, I mean, even if there's only one universe, I suppose I'm not sure. I'm disinclined to say yes because the universe is like everything, but you could still refer to the universe as this universe over here, right? Universe A as opposed to universe B, and that would make it a particular. Because you're referring to that particular universe, right? Um, so so but to simplify with the computer example, um well, kind of, let's not worry about the universe, because we're gonna get a little off track if we focus on something so big. The point here is just that whatever individual we're looking at, we're talking about that individual as a basic constituent of the world. And this is why I'm kind of like not sure what to do with this question, because the world, when I say the world, I mean the universe, right? I mean the sum total of existence. Um, so the universe might be kind of a special case, right? But anyway, don't worry about that too much. So individuals are basic. Types of things are not basic. Individuals are basic. And the kinds of properties that individuals have are properties that belong to the individual itself, not to its parts. So the book uses the example of the trees that are in bloom, the cherry trees. When the cherry blossoms bloom, we don't say, oh, look, that branch on that tree is blooming. We say that the tree is in bloom. Likewise, with the leaves falling off of the trees outside of my window right now, I don't see like, oh, this branch is losing its leaves and that branch is losing its leaves. No, I say the tree is losing its leaves. Here, the tree is the individual, right? So there are three important aspects of this sort of intuitive picture of individuals that we've got. One is that individuals are basic. Sure, individuals might have parts. You know, I can take apart my computer, but my computer, when it's assembled, is a basic unit of it's a basic individual, right? Individuals can also be certain kinds of things, right? And I'm sure that this we haven't explicitly raised this yet, but it might be there in the background as you're thinking about this. Individuals are certain kinds of things, right? My dog here is a kind of animal, namely a dog, and my cats are cats. So they belong to two different kinds, and those two different kinds belong to a sort of more broad kind, which is the kind mammal, to which I also belong, right? And of course, properties belong to or depend upon individuals. So the properties that an individual has are not are to do with the individual as a whole. So yeah, they could, but then we couldn't understand what they were if everything is just atoms or going all the way down to subatomic particles. Then what differentiates one thing from another thing, right? Um, so types of things are universals, and individuals are particulars. No, so if you had a computer, one had a GPU and the other doesn't, they would be two different computers. Um, so we'll see. We'll see as we continue. So Aristotle here is helpful when it comes to understanding things as things. Aristotle writes in the categories that individuals are primary substances. So I'm a primary substance, you're a primary substance. This marble bust of Aristotle, which is actually I believe, a copy of an earlier, this is a Roman copy of an earlier Greek copy. This is an individual, this is a primary substance. My coffee cup is a primary substance. And primary substances underlie everything else in the world. They're the ultimate constituents of the world. That is, the world is made up of all the individuals that there are. That's what the world is for Aristotle, is all the primary substances out there, all of the plants, all of the animals, all of the people, all of the artifacts, right? Those are all primary substances. And properties depend on primary substances. Properties are sort of held together by primary substance, right? You can't have a property like large or blue on its own. You need an object to instantiate those properties. You need a large object or a blue object. So you can't have largeness by itself or blueness by itself. Remember, this is different from Plato. Plato thought that maybe there were forms for these things, largeness or blueness, and those were more real than the particulars. But Aristotle's not like that. You remember, in the fresco from the fresco by Raphael, the School of Athens, there's a reason why he has Plato pointing up and Aristotle pointing out and down at the world, right? So That's the difference. And Aristotle's work influences a lot of medieval thinkers on this. In medieval philosophy, there's a lot of this sort of thing, a lot of um, metaphysics, a lot of talking about substance. If you read somebody like, for example, Thomas Aquinas, you're going to see that. But we're not going to cover that today. So this is our substance view, or the substance attribute framework. This is one way of understanding the features of individuals. So let's explore this a little bit. So consider the idea that individual entities belong to kinds. The idea here is that every individual has some kind of essence, which makes it a member of its kind and not some other kind. So now we're going to try to exercise our brains a little bit and try and come up with some examples of individuals and what essential features place them into their kind. So go ahead and use the chat or use voice if you want. But what I need is an individual and the features that make it what it is and not something else. What you'd be doing here is naming individuals and their essential attributes. So go ahead. Yeah, a bachelor is an unmarried man, but we want a particular bachelor, maybe Bob, right? And Bob instantiates a particular property, Bob being unmarried, which makes him a bachelor, right? Sure, but a car is a kind of thing, but other things might also have trunks and engines. So what is the essential feature, or what are the essential features of a car which make it a car and not a minivan, right? Um, well, there are 6-string basses. Are they guitars? Motorcycles, good example. Yeah, 2 wheels powered by motors, although there are some 3-wheeled motorcycles. A male lion and its mane. That's a good guess, although some female lions, in the absence of males, will grow manes. It's very interesting. Intersex persons is a good example. So having having anatomy that doesn't fit with the binary, the sort of gender binary. Um, dogs, 4-legged mammals. Yep, although there are other 4-legged mammals. Featherless bipeds. Yeah, maybe. Defined by DNA, perhaps. Well, your phone isn't a phone because of where it is, right? Right. We're looking for some kind of intrinsic, this is important, intrinsic um features. Yeah, there you go. Yep, we'd have to differentiate a little further, but that's what I'm looking for. Yeah, a 6-string bass is going to have maybe different tuning, right? It's going to have its 2 extra strings are going to be lower than the 2 lowest strings on my guitar, right? They're going to begin and end at different notes, we could say. And yeah, guitars have thinner strings, guitars have a shorter scale length. Um, these are all attributes, right? And what what somebody who's looking for an essence, we'll call them an essentialist, right? Yeah, bracelet is a bracelet and not a necklace because it's sized for a wrist and that's where it's supposed to go, right? So yeah, um if you're an essentialist, um yeah, kind of. Yeah, exactly. A pine tree is a pine tree. It has leaves or needles that don't shed, et cetera, et cetera. It has some essential characteristics that make it what it is and not something else, like a spruce tree or a maple tree, right? So these are all attributes. And it's the essential attributes which place a particular entity into a particular kind. And we can argue about about what attributes are essential, right? It's not clear. And sometimes essentialism is a little bit I don't know. I'm getting ahead of myself a little here, but I tend to shy away from essentialism. Um because because there are some problems with our notion of substance on frameworks like this and like the next one we're going to look at. Um, we'll see what those problems are momentarily. But if you're an essentialist, you think that there is some essential characteristic or set of characteristics that makes an item what it is. So, when it comes to human beings, you might be tempted to say, well, it's our DNA or something like that that makes us human, and that might be one of the things that makes us essentially human. Philosophers have thought about it differently. For example, Aristotle, Descartes, and Kant, not only would they not have known about DNA, but they thought that it was not, um, anything necessarily biological that made us what we are, but it was that reason, our ability to use reason, is what makes us human. That is what separates us from other animals. We can use reason. The beasts cannot, right? That's what they would have said. Uh, yeah, we have all these things, right? Although animals also, a lot of animals also have object permanence, and some higher animals seem to have empathy as well, particularly social animals. So if two individuals share this attribute, reason, then they belong to the kind that is human being. Yeah, exactly. There are some psychopaths out there, I'm sure, that do not have empathy or who don't have very much. Um, so some attributes are essential. So if you're an essentialist when it comes to human beings, then you would say that what you've got to have in order to be a human is reason. But there are other accidental attributes you have that are not essential for you to be the kind of thing that you are. So we all belong to the kind human, right? And whether that's because of our DNA or because of our ability to use reason, we all agree that we are all humans. So there's some set of essential characteristics that makes us human, makes us, places us in that kind. But there are some accidental attributes that some of us have, which do not determine whether we are human or not, but which are nonetheless properties or characteristics that some of us have. Can we think of some of those? Real quick, we only need a few examples. Yeah, brown hair. Race is kind of a loaded term because race is I see what you're saying, but race is the notion of race is rooted in some is like 19th century ideas of scientific racialism. Yeah, as Brooks says, race is not really a thing. Um, ethnicity is a thing. And I think a lot of people um, when they say race, they really mean like ethnicity. Um, but yeah, ethnicity is an accidental attribute. That's not to say like in my case, oh, I'm accidentally white. I meant to be something else. No, that's not what that means. It means that the color of my skin is an accidental attribute. It doesn't determine whether or not I'm a human being, right? Um, cannot breathe underwater might be, I don't know. I'm tempted to say that's maybe more essential. That's one of the defining characteristics of human beings. We definitely can't breathe underwater unless we have some kind of apparatus. But yeah, brown hair, so hair color, skin color, height, um, are all accidental things. There are very short humans and very tall humans, but they're all humans. There are humans with all kinds of different hair colors and skin colors, but they're all humans. Um, yeah, likewise with gender. I mean, if you sort of take the view that um, gender is kind of not really a binary, but maybe more of a spectrum, then there are potentially many different ways of would say expressing gender. Yeah, maybe gender identity would work better. um I mean, the point is whether you're you could be cisgender male, cisgender or cisgender man, cisgender woman, a trans man, trans woman. You could be like maybe agender, like non-binary, but all of these are accidental in that they don't determine whether you're a human being or not. There's a range of genders that are expressed in humans. Um, and that doesn't make you, that doesn't have anything to do with, you know, being human or not. It's not one of the essential characteristics, like perhaps the use of reason or your DNA or um, the form of your body or something like that, right? Blood group, yeah, that's a good one. I'm not sure what my blood type is, but there are many different kinds, right? Like A, B, O, and there's positives and negatives, and I'm not a physician, right? But yeah, blood group. These are accidental character. Anything that you could change, and still be human, or anything that you could have been otherwise and still be human. Um, like I might have been born with a different color hair, conceivably. I'd still be a human being, right? So that's the substance attribute framework, and it helps us to answer an interesting and important question. And that question is, what is change? Change is a change in attributes. Changes to essential attributes might change the kind of thing that an individual is. Um, so, um, oh, they also might destroy what an individual is. An individual might cease to be if there is enough change. So, I mean, if we stipulate that my genetic code is an essential attribute for me to be human, then if I changed my DNA in the right ways, I might cease to be human if we changed it enough, right? If we changed 2% of my DNA in the right way, I could be a chimpanzee and not a human. If I changed it a little bit more, I could be a dolphin. If I changed it a lot in the right kinds of way, I could end up being a banana, right? So I would cease to be, or I would just be dead and not alive. And that's a kind of thing too, right? Yeah, Ryan, that's a good point. A dead human is a different kind of thing um, than a living human. So let's say I had perfect science. Yeah, it would be interesting. I mean, it would be interesting to experience being a different sort of creature for a day or two, but not forever. Um, like if I could change myself into a dolphin, for example, then um someone else would have to maybe remember to change me back because I'd be busy being a dolphin, and I wouldn't be thinking like anyway, I don't know. I wouldn't want to be one forever, I'm saying. I'd certainly wouldn't want to be a banana forever. Um, so changes to essential attributes change the kind of thing that a thing is, right? Um, what do you mean, Braden? What kind of misconceptions?
Just that, like in some cases of genetic disabilities and things like that, it can be because of differences in DNA. And obviously they're still human, like that doesn't change. But can that kind of cause misconception around the idea of changing DNA and what is human? You know what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, there is a danger there, I think. If you look at, for example, think of like Germany, the Nazis, right before the First World War, they did not know about DNA, but they did have notions of genes and traits and heritability. And it got to a point where people with disabilities, as well as people from different ethnic groups. So the Jews, the Romani, Slavic peoples, were all considered less than human, right? Now they didn't know about DNA, but they had this idea that there is some essential traits that these people have uh, that makes them less human, right? And it was like that with disabled people. It was like that with LGBTQ people, right? So, um, there is, and this is kind of one of the reasons I'm like not really into essentialism, personally speaking. This is my personal opinion, but um, you know, one thing, if you talk to it, nobody wants to talk to a racist. Um, but if you do, you'll probably find that they're an essentialist about uh, you know, uh, and they'll say that there's some essential characteristic that their group has that every other group of people doesn't have, right? I find that you get this sort of biological essentialism a lot from, yeah, the eugenicists were essentialists, as Brooke says. You also get a lot of this rhetoric from like your JK Rowling crowd, if you know what I'm saying, the people who are railing against rights for transgender individuals. You get a lot of biological essentialism there. Um, and it's not a very big leap to go from that to at least it seems to me to be that essentialism seems to be connected in an important way to a lot of the hateful stuff that they say. Um, so I'm kind of like, ooh, about essentialism. It's not to say that essentialism is inherently bad, but there might be a slippery slope there, and slippery slope is not a fallacy if the slope is real. Yeah. So if you're going to be an essentialist, you got to be careful. Yeah, because eugenicists, racists, um, homophobes, transphobes, and so forth kind of tend to be essentialist. um, nice, nice. Yeah, yeah. I don't like it. Also, it's also just difficult when we try to pause. Okay, we've got this list of essential characteristics, and this was kind of the point of the examples that I was trying to get you to generate, is that you can come up with a list of essential characteristics, and it's very easy to always think of a counterexample. So, um, it's really maybe more of a family resemblance kind of thing as opposed to a necessary and sufficient conditions kind of thing when we're understanding what things are. Um, yeah, I would say you could be a bundle theorist, which is what we're going to talk about next time. Um, yeah, yeah, Ryan, that's another good point. You can easily, I'm not saying that all essentialists are horrible. I'm just saying that essentialism, I guess, can, like you're saying here, can be weaponized, right? And that's, I guess, is a worry for me. Um, so yeah, in this example, maybe my DNA, if I change it in the right kind of way, right, I would cease to be human. So that's a very important caveat, like um I'm not talking about it like in a eugenicist sort of way. I mean, if I changed my DNA in the appropriate ways, then I would be something else. The biological traits that I express would be like, you know, they could make me into a duck-billed platypus or something. And I'd cease to be human if I were a duck-billed platypus, right? But I wouldn't cease to be human if I were, altered such that I, um, had different colored hair, right? My hair color is an accidental attribute. So I can go ahead and change that and I'm still human. It's not like I show up with purple hair tomorrow and people are like, oh my God, he's inhuman. Ah. So now let's talk about a sort of hierarchy of individuals. This is another thing we get from Aristotle. Aristotle proposed something like the following, where there are three kinds of primary substances. There are animals, there are plants, and there are what we would call elements. Now, animals include us. Um, Animals are anything that possess a nutritive soul and a sensitive soul. This isn't in the textbook, but Aristotle thought that there were sort of three kinds of soul. Um, there's a nutritive soul, which is what enables the body to grow and reproduce, to eat food. Uh, Plants and animals all have this. So a tree can grow from a seed, it can get the sunlight, make sugars from the sunlight via photosynthesis, it can draw water and minerals from the ground. Um, and it can reproduce. It can flower and get pollinated by birds, bees, and butterflies and so forth, and produce seeds and whatever. That's the nutritive soul for Aristotle. And animals have this too, because animals can, eat food, grow, reproduce, etc. Um, Plants don't have sensitive souls, though. Animals do. Animals have a sensitive soul, and that is the part of the soul that allows you to sense your environment and to move around within it. So animals have this, plants don't. Although, if you've ever watched footage of plants that's been sped up a lot, you'll see that plants actually do move around quite a bit. So Aristotle was probably wrong about that. Humans are special because we have a rational soul. But all other animals just have the nutritive and sensitive souls. Plants just have a nutritive soul. So plants, nutritive soul, animals, nutritive, sensitive soul. And elements are basic individuals acknowledged by science. Um, Aristotle identified four kinds of element, and those are earth, air, fire, and water, right? Which is obviously not how we understand the chemical elements today. Um, well, animals would only have two, right? So animals have nutritive souls and sensitive souls. Aristotle would deny that they had rational souls. We're the only animals that, because he's an essentialist about the human being, um, we have reason and animals don't. And here's another thing about the danger of essentialism. I mean, Aristotle, when we read him today, we interpret him as saying humans have reason. But Aristotle thought that some people had more reason than other people did. And that was how he justified slavery. Um, Aristotle actually argued that some people are naturally slaves because they have less reason. Yeah, kind of problematic, right? And he also argued that some people are naturally supposed to be in charge. Um, Older men have the most reason, according to Aristotle. So that's why they run society. Women have less reason, so they just run the household. Children don't have very much reason, so they don't have very many rights. And slaves have very little reason, which is why it's okay for them to be slaves, right? So yeah, it's not really very nice, you know. Um, yeah, it's yeah. There are things I like about Aristotle, and then I remember, oh yeah, he argued for slavery. Ooh, kind of problematic, right? Um, so we anyway, to get back to the chemical elements, we understand chemical elements, the elements on the periodic table. Those are elements that we understand them now. So it's different from how Aristotle would have understood elements. Crumley adds another kind of substance. He adds artifacts. So these could be artifacts that people make, like chairs and tables and computers. But animals also make artifacts. You know, birds build nests, beavers build lodges and dams, and so forth. Ants build hills, bees build beehives. These are artifacts as well because they're artificial. They're produced by another being. Yeah, a lot of people did. Um, well, slavery was already very much a thing. Um, so Aristotle is kind of like saying, well, this is why what's happening is okay. It wasn't like there weren't enslaved people, and then Aristotle was like, hey, we should enslave a bunch of people, and here's why. No, slavery was already practiced all over the world. Um, Slaves in ancient Greece actually did have legal protection uh, in ways that like enslaved people in the Americas did not, but it still wouldn't have been a fun time, right? You're still a slave. Um, so yeah, it's pretty bad. The sensitive soul is what allows you to sense the world and move around in it. So the sensitive soul would, for Aristotle, would underwrite your five senses and locomotion and motor behavior, right? No problem. But yeah, he argued for a lot of yeah, yeah, Aristotle. So anyway, the point is, here's our hierarchy. Our individuals all belong to some kind, and our individual is our primary substance. Now, its essential attributes tell us what kind of thing it is, and its accidental attributes differentiate it from other members of its kind. And kinds we can think of as families. There's an animal family, plant family, artifacts, elements. So take animals, right? I share certain essential characteristics with all of you, and that makes us all humans. But we have accidental characteristics that make us all different from one another. And other animals have different essential characteristics that make them the kind of creatures that they are, right? So this is a pretty straightforward, intuitive view, right? But it's not the only one. Another one is the notion of substance as substratum. Um, Substratum is Latin. It just means that which supports or holds together the various properties of an object. So here, I'm not a substance, you're not a substance, the cup is not a substance. It's like for Aristotle, these are all primary substances. But on the substratum view, substance is just what the properties stick to, or it's what has the properties, or it's what holds the properties together. And John Locke argued for something like this in his essay on human understanding. He said that there's a little typo here. We naturally suspect, that's what it's supposed to say, that there is a certain something that holds the qualities or properties of individuals together. So qualities, as Locke called them, or properties as we're calling them, don't exist by themselves, right? Right? Like again, as I said before, you can't have largeness on its own or blueness on its own. You need a large object or a blue object. So substratum joins the properties together. Locke writes, we accustom ourselves to suppose some substratum wherein the qualities do subsist and from which they do result, which therefore we call substance. But what is this substance itself? Well, we don't really know. Locke says it's a supposition of he knows not what support of such qualities. Now, Locke's view is a criticism of Aristotle's view, and it's also a distinct view of substance as substratum, right? Because Aristotle thought that when we experience an entity, when I look at or interact with the cup on my desk, I'm experiencing the primary substance directly. But Locke is saying that we infer substance. Our notion of substance is an inference, right? So I look at the cup of my desk right here. Aristotle would say this cup is a primary substance, but Locke would say no. What you've got here is a collection of properties. Solidity. It's cylindrical. It has volume. It has this handle here, and these properties all adhere to something, and that something is substance. But I don't directly perceive the substance, only all the properties that the cup has. So I infer the substance. Do you see what I mean? Um, it's kind of similar. Kind of similar. So it sounds like you're talking about moderate realism. Um, where the properties are in the items. Here, the properties aren't in the item. They stick to the substance. The substance is like the metaphysical glue for all the properties that this cup possesses that make it what it is. So, yeah, substantia is just what holds together the properties for Aristotle. Like for a moderate realist like Aristotle, the properties are there, in like cupness isn't out there as a form. The property of cupness is in this matter, and that's what makes it the individual that it is. So Locke's view is a little different, but there are similarities. But what is this substance in general, you might be asking? Locke thinks that all we have is this sense of support, this sense of holding together the properties, right? So substance is we know not what. It's just like, I don't know what it is. I know that it's holding together all these properties. Beyond that, no idea what it is, right? Think of it like this. If you take an object and you subtract away all of its properties one by one, take away the solidity, take away the cylindricality, take away the volume, take away the handle, take away the color. What are you left with? Nothing really besides this idea of supporting or holding together all the properties, which Bishop Berkeley said, well, that sounds a lot like nothing, right? But that's substratum theory. Objects are substance in that they're made of a substratum, and that supports the various properties which make the object belong to the kind of thing that it is, and the properties which individuate that object. So that's substratum theory. And I'm not sure whether this is Michael or Michel. But anyway, Lou, in his 2006 publication, calls this a reductionist view of objects, because it reduces the object down to its substratum and its properties. It's not a cup, it's a collection of properties adhering to substance, right? That's why he treats it as reductionist. Substance or substratum theorists also claim that this helps us to distinguish between two individuals. Each individual has its own unique substratum. But that may not be the case. And the reason why has to do with the nature, or rather our lack of ability to say anything about the nature of substrata, right? Does the substratum have any properties itself? It doesn't seem like it, right? Why? Well, if substratum did have properties like the property of holding together other properties, well, then we'd need another substratum to support that property, and so on and so on and so on. We'd be looking at an infinite regress, essentially. So substrata don't have any properties. All we can say is that it just holds properties together, but substrata are propertyless. So as a result, the notion of substrata can't help us distinguish between individuals. The example Crumley uses is this. Imagine that you have two identical books. Their properties are identical, absolutely identical. They're the exact same books, but we have two copies of them. We can't say anything about the book's substratum. Then how do we differentiate between them? Because their properties are identical. And saying they exist in different places or at different times won't help us here. So sure, I could say, well, this book is over there and that book is over there, but that doesn't help the substratum theorist, because he wants metaphysical reasons. He wants, something intrinsic to the objects that differentiates them. And we don't have that here, because the books have identical properties, and their substrata are supposed to be what differentiate them. But how? If all substrata does is hold the properties together and they have identical properties, then substrata do not help us to differentiate between book A and book B. And substrata seems to be the same everywhere you look. It just seems to be what holds properties together. So this idea that it's supposed to help us distinguish between two individuals is pretty questionable. Some recently have proposed that there are things called bare particulars or thin particulars. These particulars are not things in themselves, but they make an individual this individual as opposed to that individual. This notion is a little tricky to get your head around. They're propertyless but real. So if you take away all of the properties from this cup, what you have left is not just substance, but perhaps a bare particular. It's a propertyless this objectness, not that objectness that this cup has. That would be a bare particular. That's what makes it what it is. Don't spin your wheels on this too much. It is tricky to think about, but yeah, bare particular, it's like a sort of thisness or thatness that the cup has, even if I take away all its other properties. So thin particulars are propertyless but real. It's pretty far out. don't worry too much about it. But we can differentiate. This is the problem, right? This is the problem. You've really got to the heart of the problem. Like, if I have those two identical books, I know that there are two different books, but I need to explain why they're different by appealing to their intrinsic properties. And substratum theory fails at doing this. That's the problem, right? But I know, like, I can see, well, there's that book and there's that book. And the substratum theorist wants to explain why they're different books, but they can't. Because substrata are just what hold the properties together. So that's no help. And the properties all are identical. So we're talking intrinsic things, not extrinsic. What we want is an explanation of the intrinsic features that individuate these particulars. And substratum theory can't get us that. That's the problem, right? But maybe there are some solutions. We could just dispense with this notion of substrata, substratum as substance altogether. Yeah, but that's a different question, right? Here you're differentiating. Yeah, that's the problem. We can't differentiate on this theory. We can't differentiate between two identical objects, two separate identical objects. So it doesn't work for us, right? But maybe we can just dispense with this idea of substratum. That's what we'll look at next time. We'll look at bundle theory. And then we'll start to look at questions of being. We'll look at a little bit of process philosophy from Alfred North Whitehead. And we'll look at questions related to being, like capital B being, of Martin Heidegger. A little bit of a caution. We can differentiate between them, but we want our theory to differentiate between them too. Do you see what I mean? Like, if I have two identical books in front of me, I can go, that's one book, and that other book is different than this individual book. I can say they are two different particulars. But my theory, if I'm a substratum theorist, cannot do that. And that's what we need. We need a theory of individuals that will help us to distinguish between that book and that book. Like, sure, I can do it. How am I doing it? I need a theory that explains how I'm doing it. Well, maybe. And that might be part of the problem. Like, if I'm using, it might be fine if I'm using spatial location or time to differentiate between the books. That's not something that substratum theory allows me to do. So I need a different theory, right? Because substratum theory is about what's intrinsic to these objects. And I can't differentiate between these objects based on any of their intrinsic qualities. That's the problem. It's a problem with the theory. Not that I can't be like, oh no, I've got two books, but they're both the same. You know what I mean? It's a problem with the theory. The theory can't do what I can do. It can't explain what I, as a reasoning agent, can do. So we need to change it or get a new theory. Maybe that's bundle theory. Also, yes, process philosophy from Alfred North Whitehead, a mathematician and philosopher who worked closely with Bertrand Russell. And big B, capital B, being questions with Martin Heidegger. Now, if you thought things got a little dark today with Aristotle and slavery, I've got some bad news for you. And this is a bit of a content warning that I've started to offer in recent years. Heidegger was just a straight up Nazi. He was a member of the Nazi Party. Now, it's not like he was a member of the SS or something, but some of the views that he held are very, very problematic. right? So that's a warning that, I actually haven't read too far ahead. I don't know if Crumley addresses this or not, but I think it's an important point to raise. We're trying to look at the ideas, not the individuals. And there's a whole there's this whole notion of separating the art from the artist, if you like. But it really is questionable the extent to which we can do that. Um, so that's just a content warning. We got to learn a little bit about Heidegger. It's in the textbook. But Heidegger was a pretty problematic individual, and you should know that, right? I'm not going to gloss over it. I'm not going to sugarcoat Heidegger and be like, "Oh, yeah, sure he was a Nazi, but it wasn't that bad." No, it's pretty bad to be a Nazi. And Heidegger was a Nazi. So I'm just putting that out there so that, it doesn't seem like I'm glossing over anything. The exam is taking place over the exam period. So I believe from December 8th until the classes end on the 8th, but the exam period is after that. The exam is due on the last day of the exam period, which is December 22nd, if I'm not mistaken. And it'll be like the test, quiz 1 and quiz 2. Yeah, it's going to be open from the 8th, like last day of class, till the 22nd. You can complete it whenever you want, but once you'll begin, there'll be a time limit, just like the quizzes. No, it's not going to be a fixed date. And it's take home, so it's open book. It's just like the quizzes, but a little bit longer. And it'll be cumulative. The quizzes are not cumulative. This will be cumulative. Anyway, just make sure for the next class you've read through the rest of the chapter, and we'll try and finish off our our materials for this week next time. So thanks everyone. Yeah, there's an essay that's due on the December 8th, and then the final exam is due on the 22nd. Thank you, Mohammed. I think I will feel better. I think it's just that I'm tired from the time change. But thank you. All right. Well, I'll see you all on Wednesday. Bye for now.